I always thought that living in Seville would be peaceful. My name is Catalina, and at 30, I enjoy my life working as an online marketing specialist from home. The house I live in was a gift from my uncle, a gesture I deeply appreciated. It's a charming place, with high ceilings and bright, airy rooms. I had no idea how quickly my sanctuary would turn into a battleground. It all started about a year ago. I was in the middle of a project, carefully crafting an ad campaign, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before going to answer. To my surprise, there stood my parents, Marta and Juan. They looked rather distressed. "Catalina, we need to talk," Marta said as she stepped inside, her voice tinged with worry. "Sure, what's going on?" I asked, trying to gauge their mood. My parents had been facing financial trouble ever since our old family home started falling apart. Renovations were far beyond their budget, and their income couldn't keep up with the rising costs. One looked around the house, and before long, he said, "This place is enormous. It seems like a waste for you to live here alone. Why don't we move in?" I was stunned. "Wait, what? You can't just decide to move in here without talking to me first. I have my own life and work to consider." Marta chimed in, "Well, your father and I don't have a place to go. We've already sold our house. This one is perfect for us." I felt my heart sink. But this house was given to me by Uncle Luis. He told me I could use it as I please. Juan's face turned red with frustration. "Luis gave you this house. You didn't even ask for it. You took advantage of the situation." "That's not true," I retorted. "I simply had a conversation with Uncle Luis, and he offered it to me. It wasn't some scheme." Despite my protests, my parents had already made up their minds. They planned to move in the very next weekend. Reluctantly, I agreed to let them stay, but only because I couldn't just leave them without a place to go. The day they moved in was chaotic. Boxes were everywhere, and my parents seemed to be in a perpetual state of discontent. They began to criticize my lifestyle immediately. "Catalina, you're already 30. Don't you think it's time to consider settling down and getting married?" Marta asked one evening as we were unpacking. "I'm happy with my work," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "I don't need a husband to validate my choices." "Look at your sister, Isabel," one said. "She's married and working for a company. You could learn something from her." I sighed. Isabel's life isn't perfect either. She's just a temp in a dead-end job. I may not have a conventional career, but I'm successful. Marta's eyes narrowed. "At least she's trying to build a family. You just sit at home and mess around on your computer." Their words cut deep, but I tried to brush them off. I knew that their generation didn't fully understand the nature of remote work, but their constant belittling was hurtful. Then, things got worse. Isabel, my younger sister, showed up unannounced one day, carrying a suitcase and looking as disheveled as ever. "Catalina, hi. I've come to stay," Isabel announced without preamble. "Wait, what's going on?" I asked, bewildered. "I'm going through a divorce and need a place to crash," she explained. "So, I'll be staying here from now on." Before I could say anything, Isabel headed upstairs and claimed one of the guest rooms. My frustration was mounting. Not only was I now sharing my home with my parents, but Isabel's unexpected arrival made things even more stressful. The tension in the house grew. Marta and Juan's constant comparison of me to Isabel was unbearable. Despite their financial struggles and Isabel's divorce, they treated me as if I were the failure of the family. To cope with the stress, I decided to adopt a pet. A friend of mine had a Persian cat named Luna that needed a new home. Luna was the sweetest little creature, and I hoped she would bring some comfort to my increasingly chaotic life. When I brought Luna home, my parents and Isabel were initially skeptical. "A cat? Really, Catalina?" Isabel asked, looking disdainful. She's a great companion, I replied, ignoring the judgment in her voice. Besides, she's my responsibility, not yours. The family's attitude towards Luna softened once they met her. They couldn't resist her soft fur and gentle purring, but the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, while I was busy working, Luna had a little accident on Isabel's clothes. Isabel's rage was explosive. Catalina, how could you let your cat do this? These were my favorite clothes. I tried to explain that Luna was still adjusting to her new home and that accidents happen, but Isabel wasn't having any of it. This is your fault. Pay for the cleaning, or else. The confrontation left me shaken. I didn't know what to expect next. The tension in the house was now unbearable. As the days passed, the hostility continued to grow, and it seemed like every action I took was met with criticism. The situation at home was becoming unbearable. It felt like every day brought a new challenge, and I was struggling to keep up. Isabel's anger over Luna's accident only marked the beginning of the tension. One evening, as I was working on a new marketing campaign, Marta barged into my office. "Catalina, we need to talk," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. I looked up from my computer, weary. "What's it about this time?" "It's about Isabel's clothes," Marta began. "She's been complaining nonstop. She's asked for compensation, and I think it's only fair." I felt a surge of frustration. I've already explained that Luna is still getting used to her new environment. Accidents happen. I'm not responsible for replacing Isabel's clothes. Juan, who had been standing in the doorway, nodded in agreement. "Catalina, you should have been more careful. It's not like we can afford to keep replacing things." I tried to remain calm. I don't have the money for that. And honestly, Isabel should be more understanding. I'm already doing my best to accommodate everyone. Their criticism didn't end there. Isabel, who had overheard our conversation, stormed into the room. "You think you're so superior with your fancy job and your big house. But this is about respect, Catalina. I'm not asking for much, just a little consideration." My patience was wearing thin. "Respect goes both ways, Isabel. I've put up with more than I should have already." Days passed, and the hostility in the house continued to escalate. Every small issue became a major argument. Isabel seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Even the smallest of mistakes were magnified into huge problems. Then came the turning point that pushed everything over the edge. One night, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Isabel arguing with my parents in the living room. Their voices were raised, and the conversation was quickly turning ugly. Curious and anxious, I walked into the room. "What's going on?" Isabel's face was flushed with anger. "Catalina's cat soiled my clothes again. I've had enough. She needs to get rid of that animal." My heart sank. "Isabel, it was one accident. Luna's still adjusting. Can't you be a little more patient?" Juan jumped in, his voice firm. "Catalina, this isn't just about the clothes. It's about the fact that you've been neglecting us. We're living here too, and you need to take responsibility." The argument grew heated, and before long, Isabel and my parents were demanding that I and Luna leave the house. "We're not comfortable living here with your cat," Isabel said, her eyes blazing. "Either the cat goes or you do." My shock turned to anger. So now I'm being kicked out of my own home? Because of a minor issue with Luna? "Yes," Marta said sharply. "It's not just about Luna. It's about how you've treated us. You've been ungrateful and inconsiderate." I was devastated. The house that had once been my sanctuary was now the source of my misery. I knew I had to make a decision. The idea of letting my family dictate my life was unacceptable. I had been pushed too far. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let my family's entitlement and disrespect drive me out of my home. I needed to reclaim my independence. I decided to contact Uncle Luis. I dialed his number and waited for him to pick up. Catalina, how are you? Uncle Luis's voice was warm but tired. Hi, Uncle Luis, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. I want to discuss the house. There was a pause on the other end. What's the matter? I took a deep breath and explained the situation. My parents and my sister have moved in, and things have become really difficult. They've now demanded that Luna and I leave. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry to hear that, Uncle Luis said sympathetically. If you want, I can officially transfer the title of the house to you. You can do what you need to do. The offer was a lifeline. Yes, please. I think it's time I made some changes. The next few days were a whirlwind. I worked with Uncle Luis to get the paperwork in order. The title was officially transferred to me, giving me the authority to make decisions about the property. As I signed the final documents, I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The house was now officially mine, but the true test was yet to come. The confrontation with my family was far from over, and I knew it would be a challenge to stand up to their demands and hold my ground. The tension in the house was palpable. Every corner seemed to echo with unspoken resentment. Isabel's complaints had become a daily ritual, and my parents weren't any better. It felt like my home was being suffocated by their anger and demands. The day after I finalized the house transfer, I decided it was time to let my family know what was happening. I gathered them in the living room, feeling a mix of nervousness and resolve. Luna, my loyal Persian cat, sat beside me, sensing the change in atmosphere. Everyone, I need to talk to you, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I've had enough of the way things have been going. I've contacted Uncle Luis, and the house is now officially mine. Marta's face turned pale. What are you saying, Catalina? I'm saying that I've decided to sell the house, I said firmly. I can't continue living like this. I've endured enough disrespect and unfair treatment. Isabel's eyes widened in shock. You can't be serious. This is our home too. Yes, but it's my home, I countered. And I'm not going to stay here under these conditions. You've all made it clear that you don't want Luna here, and you've disrespected my space and my life choices. I can't stay in this environment anymore. Juan's face turned red with anger. You're being unreasonable. This is a drastic step. It's not drastic, it's necessary, I replied. I've tried to be understanding, but you've all pushed me too far. I'm not going to be a doormat in my own home. The room fell silent. My parents and Isabel exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. They had expected me to back down, but I was resolute. I'm giving you 2 weeks to find alternative arrangements, I said, feeling a pang of guilt but standing firm. After that, I'll put the house on the market. Marta's voice trembled. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my responsibility, I said, trying to maintain my composure. You've made it clear that you don't want me here, and now it's time for me to act on that. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house grew even more strained. My family's panic set in as they scrambled to find a place to live. The arguments became more frequent, and their attempts to appeal to my sense of guilt grew desperate. Isabel tried to reason with me, but I remained unmoved. One evening, Isabel approached me with a look of defeat. Catalina, please. I know we've had our differences, but this is really hard for us. Can't you reconsider? I shook my head. Isabel, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about standing up for myself. You and Mom and Dad have treated me poorly for too long, and now it's time for me to reclaim my life. As the deadline approached, I made the final preparations to list the house. I contacted a real estate agent and started getting everything ready for the sale. The process was stressful, but it also brought a sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my own future. The day before the house was set to go on the market, I held a final meeting with my family. The tension was thick as we sat in the living room, the last remnants of our shared life together. "This is the final notice," I said, my voice steady. "Tomorrow, the house will officially be listed for sale. I'm leaving with Luna, and you need to be out by then." Isabel and my parents looked at each other, their faces a mix of anger and resignation. They knew they had pushed me to this point, but it was clear that the reality of their situation was sinking in. "I hope you understand why I had to do this," I said, feeling a wave of sadness. "I wish things could have been different, but this is what needed to happen." As I packed up my things and prepared to leave, a part of me felt a pang of regret. But the overwhelming need to protect my own well-being outweighed the sadness. The house that had once been my refuge was now a symbol of conflict and hurt. The next morning, I left the house with Luna by my side. The street outside seemed brighter, and the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I was moving on to a new chapter in my life, one where I could finally find peace and rebuild my sense of self. After leaving the house, the world felt different. The weight of family expectations and resentment was finally off my shoulders. I arrived at my new apartment in Seville, a cozy, pet-friendly place with a welcoming atmosphere. Luna seemed to sense the change too, her content purrs filling the quiet space. I spent the first few days unpacking and setting up my new home. The apartment was small but filled with light, and it quickly began to feel like a sanctuary. Luna adjusted to her new surroundings with ease, finding her favorite spots and curling up in the sunniest corners. Despite the initial relief, there was still a part of me that was troubled by the fallout of my decision. I worried about my parents and Isabel, wondering if they had managed to find a new place to live. I had cut off all contact, not out of malice, but because I needed to protect my own mental health. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk around my new neighborhood. As I strolled through the vibrant streets of Seville, I felt a sense of renewal. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the sounds of a lively city. For the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine sense of freedom. A few days later, I received a letter from my former home, delivered by a mutual friend. It was from Isabel. Her letter was filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. She wrote about the difficulties they had faced in finding a new place and the strain it had put on our family. There was a tone of regret, and she expressed her hope that we could eventually reconcile. Reading the letter, I felt a pang of empathy. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore the fact that family bonds were still there, even if strained. However, I knew that reconciliation would need to come with time and perhaps some understanding from both sides. For now, I needed to focus on rebuilding my own life and finding my own path. As weeks turned into months, I settled into my new routine. My work as an online marketing specialist continued to thrive, and Luna remained a comforting presence in my life. The apartment, once a symbol of change and challenge, became a place of peace and happiness. I found new friends in the city and began to explore Seville's rich culture and history. My life was beginning to flourish in ways I hadn't imagined. I also started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding joy in helping other pets and their owners. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that my decision to take control of my life was the right one. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my sense of self and finding a way to live authentically. The experience had taught me the importance of standing up for oneself and setting boundaries, even with those we care about. As I watched Luna play in the sun, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My life was no longer defined by the conflicts and disrespect of the past. I had emerged stronger and more self-aware, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Catalina's story, marked by conflict and resolution, highlighted the complexities of familial relationships and the importance of self-respect. The journey from strife to empowerment was not easy, but it led to a new beginning, where peace and personal growth were finally within reach.
Why are you still in bed, Claire? Do something useful for once. Jared's voice cut through the morning quiet like a hammer striking metal. I groaned and turned over. I'm on doctor's orders to rest, Jared. I just made breakfast for us. Again with the excuses, he snapped. Pancakes again? I wanted omelets today. Where's your respect for my preferences? You never mentioned wanting omelets. It doesn't matter. I'm going to the diner. Eat your pathetic pancakes alone. I heard the door slam behind him as he stormed out. I sat up, rubbing my temples. My back ached, and my belly felt heavy with the weight of our unborn child. His words lingered, sharp and biting. Breakfast had always been simple. It was one of the few things I still enjoyed before the day's chaos began. It wasn't always like this. When I first told Jared about the pregnancy, he was over the moon, buying baby clothes and painting the nursery. But somewhere along the line, his excitement wilted, replaced by disdain and indifference. I pushed myself up from the bed and shuffled to the kitchen, looking at the plate of pancakes cooling on the counter. Picking up a fork, I half-heartedly nibbled on one, the taste bland and empty. My phone buzzed next to the plate, and I saw a new message from Megan, Jared's sister. "How are you holding up?" she had written. I hesitated before typing back. "Managing. Jared's being difficult again." Her reply was swift. "I'm coming over later. We need to talk." A sense of relief washed over me. Though Jared might be behaving like a different person, Megan had always been supportive. I carried my breakfast to the living room and plopped down on the couch. Reaching for the remote, I turned on the TV for company, something to drown out the silence of the empty house. An infomercial droned on about weight loss supplements, but my mind drifted, recollecting the last few months. Jared's erratic behavior, his late nights without explanation, and how he'd become a stranger sharing my home. When had things gotten so bad? 2 hours passed, and there was a knock at the door. Megan stepped in, her eyes scanning the room with concern. "Hey," she said, sitting down beside me. "What's going on?" I sighed, feeling the weight of my situation pressing down on me. He's getting more intolerable every day. Everything I do is wrong. I can't keep up with his demands. Megan's jaw tightened. "I'm worried about you. You don't deserve this. Have you thought about what you're going to do?" I placed my hand on my belly, feeling a slight flutter from the baby. I have to think about her now. I can't take much more of this. Megan nodded, her expression serious. "You know I'll help you in any way I can, right?" "Thank you, Megan. I don't know what I'd do without you." Just then, the front door swung open and Jared walked in, looking annoyed to see Megan there. "So, what's this little meeting about?" he scoffed. "Nothing you'd care about, Jared," Megan shot back. Jared glared at her, then turned to me. "And you? Are you going to sit around all day, or will you finally do something useful?" I felt a surge of determination I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm already doing something useful by taking care of our child and myself. If you can't respect that, then maybe you should reconsider your priorities." His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Instead, he grabbed his keys and walked out again, leaving behind a tense silence. Megan placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Claire. Just remember that." I nodded, feeling a little bit of that strength seeping in. This was just the beginning, but I knew I had to start standing up for myself and my baby. The breaking point was here, and with it, a chance to take back my life. "You're not coming in with me?" I asked, glancing at Jared as we parked at the doctor's office. He shook his head, barely looking up from his phone. "I've got calls to make. You'll be fine on your own." I sighed and stepped out of the car, my hand instinctively resting on my growing belly. Inside the clinic, the nurse greeted me warmly and led me to the examination room. Minutes later, Dr. Patel entered, her smile reassuring. "How are we feeling today, Claire?" she asked, checking my chart. I forced a smile. "A bit tired, but otherwise okay." "We'll do an ultrasound today, see how the little one is doing," she said, prepping the equipment. As the image of our baby appeared on the screen, I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, worry, and a flicker of hope that maybe seeing this would reignite some semblance of care in Jared. "It's a girl," Dr. Patel announced, beaming. "Congratulations, Claire." A girl. My heart swelled with love and fear for my daughter's future. Would Jared be happy? I thanked Dr. Patel and collected the photos of the ultrasound. On the drive back, I couldn't wait to share the news with Jared. Maybe this would change things. "Jared, guess what?" I said, sliding into the car and waving the photos. "We're having a girl." His expression didn't change. He glanced at the photos and then back at the road. "A girl? Great." My heart sank. "You don't seem excited." Jared shrugged. "I was hoping for a son, to carry on the family name, teach him things." I stared at him, stunned by his apathy. "Does it matter? She's our child." "Whatever," he muttered. "Can we just get home?" The drive was silent, each mile deepening the rift between us. Back at the house, I carefully placed the ultrasound photos on the fridge, but Jared didn't even glance at them. Later that evening, I set the table for dinner, trying to push aside the nagging feeling of disappointment. Jared was glued to his laptop, barely acknowledging my presence. "Come eat, Jared," I called out, trying to keep my tone light. He grunted, not moving an inch. "I'm busy." The meal remained untouched, and I ate alone, the chair opposite me glaringly empty. Just as I was about to clear the dishes, Jared finally spoke. "You need to understand, Claire," he said, not looking up. "This baby thing isn't what I signed up for. Not like this." "Not like this?" I echoed, anger and hurt bubbling up. "What do you mean, Jared?" "I wanted a son. Someone who could, never mind." He shut his laptop with a snap and stood up. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." The door slammed shut, and I was left in the emptiness of the house, feeling more alone than ever. I touched the ultrasound photo on the fridge, tracing the tiny outline of our daughter. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the house silent except for the occasional car passing by. I realized that Jared was slipping further away with each passing day. His disappointment in having a daughter was just another crack in our already fractured relationship. I couldn't let this continue. For my own sake, and for my daughter's future, I would have to find a way to protect her, even if it meant confronting the harsh realities of our marriage. Determination replaced the despair as I resolved to find a way forward, no matter what it took. I was setting up for a family barbecue when Jared walked in, looking disheveled. I glanced up from the skewers I was preparing. "You're home early." "Yeah, about that." He scratched his head, avoiding my eyes. "I quit my job." My heart skipped a beat. The irony was sharp. Here we were celebrating family, while ours was crumbling. "You what?" "I couldn't take it anymore," he said, shrugging. "I'll find something better." "Pretending everything's fine won't put food on the table, Jared. What about our expenses? The baby?" "I said I'll find something better, Claire. Just get off my back," he snapped. Megan and her boyfriend arrived moments later, filling the room with forced cheer. I put on my best smile and directed everyone outside. As we settled into the backyard, I couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. Megan's boyfriend, Dave, handed me a glass of lemonade. "You okay? You seem a bit off." "I'm fine," I lied, my eyes darting to Jared, who was already nursing his third beer in silence. Megan caught my glance and pulled me aside. "What's going on?" "He quit his job." Her eyes widened. "Without discussing it? What's his plan?" "He doesn't have one," I whispered, trying to control my frustration. I'm stuck." "Listen," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You and the baby come first. You can't let him drag you down." I nodded, her words echoing in my mind. While back at the table, Jared was ranting to Dave about former colleagues, oblivious to the tension between Megan and me. "Those idiots didn't appreciate my talents," he slurred. "I'll show them. They'll regret it." Dave glanced at me, unsure of how to respond. Yeah, I'm sure things will work out." After the guests left, Jared stumbled into the house. I cleaned up the mess, the day's events swirling in my mind. Would this new version of Jared ever go back to who he was? As I loaded the last dish into the dishwasher, the front door opened and Jared lurched in. "I'm tired," he muttered, heading to the bedroom. I finished cleaning up and followed, the silence between us thicker than ever. He was already snoring when I crawled into bed, my mind racing with worry about our future. The next few weeks were a blur of Jared's increasing absences and my solo trips to the grocery store, juggling our shrinking finances. One evening, he came back home later than usual, disheveled and visibly agitated. "Where have you been, Jared?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Out," he said, brushing past me. "You can't just leave without saying anything. We need to talk." "Talk? There's nothing to talk about." I stared at him, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "We're having a baby soon. Did you forget? He scoffed. You worry about that. I'm tired of this conversation. His words cut deep. As he stomped off to the bedroom, I sat in the living room, the baby kicking inside me. I realized I couldn't rely on him anymore. I would have to be the strong one for our child's sake, even if it meant facing this journey alone. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Jared's sloppy handwriting. Gone to clear my head. Don't wait up. I crumpled the paper, feeling an anger I'd never known before. His irresponsibility was no longer just frustrating, it was endangering our future. I picked up the phone and called Megan. I need help. Jared's gone again. She sighed on the other end. I'm coming over. We need to make a plan. I hung up, determination solidifying in my chest. This had to end. For my baby. For me. The once sparkling promise of our future together had dimmed to a cold, harsh reality. I wasn't going to let him destroy what I had left. I sat on Megan's couch, cradling a cup of tea. She looked at me with concern. You're not alone in this, Claire. We'll figure it out. Thanks, Megan. I don't know how much more I can take. Megan's eyes softened. I've been meaning to tell you something. Jared has always struggled with responsibility. Even growing up, he was always in trouble, always the one making excuses. And I thought it was just a phase, I replied, feeling the weight of her words. But this is different. We're about to have a baby. He quit his job without even talking to me. Megan sighed. It's worse than you know. He's been gambling, Claire. He lost a lot of money last week. My heart sank. Gambling? Why didn't he tell me? He's too proud to admit he's failing, and he's been hiding things from you, things you deserve to know. I put down my cup, feeling a surge of anger. I'm tired of his lies. I need to start preparing for the baby and stop focusing on him. Megan nodded. You're right. We need to find a way to secure your future. Have you thought about opening a separate bank account? I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I'll do that, and I need to talk to a lawyer. We can find someone good, Megan assured me. Meanwhile, you should stay with us. It's safer. I hesitated, then agreed. Okay, just for a while. The next day, I visited a lawyer, Sarah Johnson, who came highly recommended by Megan. Sitting in her office, I recounted the events of the past few months. Sarah listened intently. You have options, Claire. First, we can protect your assets. Second, we need to document everything. Keep a record of his absences, his erratic behavior, everything. Can we get full custody? I asked, my voice trembling. We can fight for it, Sarah assured me. But you must be prepared. Jared will likely contest it. I'm ready, I said, feeling a newfound resolve. After leaving Sarah's office, I headed back to Megan's apartment. Jared's car was parked outside. Unexpected. My pulse quickened as I reached door. Inside, Jared was pacing, Megan standing nearby, looking tense. What's going on? I asked, stepping in. Jared whirled around, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. Where the hell have you been, Claire? I met with a lawyer, I said, standing my ground. A lawyer? He scoffed, eyes narrowing. What are you planning, Claire? I'm planning to protect our daughter, I replied, my voice steady. And myself. You're not taking her away from me, he growled, stepping forward. Megan stepped between us. Back off, Jared. This is on you. He laughed bitterly. Of course you'd side with her. You never supported me. Because you never gave me a reason to, Megan shot back. Claire's doing what's best for her and the baby. Maybe you should start thinking about that. Jared's face turned crimson, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I turned to Megan, my heart pounding. Thank you. You did great, she said, pulling me into a hug. We'll get through this. Jared's outburst only solidified my resolve. I wasn't backing down. For my daughter and for myself, I was ready to fight. No more letting Jared's actions dictate our lives. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I felt stronger knowing I had Megan and Sarah by my side. The storm was far from over, but I was more determined than ever to come out stronger on the other side. I sat in the quiet of Megan's apartment, feeling the growing emptiness of our old home. My phone buzzed, an incoming call from Megan. Claire, I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Sure. Is everything okay? Just come over. It's important. I hung up, feeling a knot in my stomach. Something was wrong. I rushed to Megan's place, my fears intensifying with every step. When I arrived, Megan's worried expression met me at the door. Come in, Claire, she said, her voice low. I followed her to the living room where she handed me her phone, displaying a series of photos. Jared and a young woman, their intimacy unmistakable. My heart plummeted. "Who is she?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Her name's Lena," Megan replied, her eyes filled with sympathy. I caught them together. The photos felt like a punch to the gut. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice trembling. "He's been betraying us all along." Megan put a comforting hand on my arm. "You should confront him. You deserve to know the truth." I nodded, wiping away angry tears. "I will." Later that evening, Jared burst in through the doorway, reeking of alcohol and smugness. "Had a good day?" he sneered, his expression indifferent as usual. "Who's Lena, Jared?" I asked, unable to hold back. He froze, then laughed mockingly. "Does it even matter? Our marriage has been over for a long time, Claire. You've been cheating on me while I carry your child?" My voice broke, anger mingled with heartbreak. "Look, Claire," he said, his tone cold, "I want a divorce. Lena and I are moving on. I'll give you some money, but that's it. You and the kid can fend for yourselves." "You're a coward," I said, stepping closer, my voice more confident than I felt. "If you want a divorce, fine, but I'm not taking any of your scraps. I'm taking you to court." Jared's eyes widened momentarily, then he scoffed. "Good luck with that. I'll see to it that you get nothing." He turned and walked out, leaving me to collapse onto the couch, overwhelmed by the reality of his betrayal. But amidst the sorrow, a fierce determination took root. I wasn't going to let him destroy our lives. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah, it's Claire. I need to file for divorce. Jared's been cheating, and he's demanding a pittance to start a new life with his affair partner." "Get all the evidence you can, Claire," Sarah responded firmly. "We'll fight him every step of the way." I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. Megan sat beside me, her presence grounding. "You did the right thing, Claire. You will come out of this stronger." The days following were a whirlwind. Collecting evidence, meeting with Sarah, and preparing for the impending battle. Jared's arrogance fueled my resolve. He continued his charade, believing he would walk away unscathed. But I had different plans. Megan and I worked tirelessly, documenting Jared's every move. When the day came to face him in court, I felt ready. Jared was vile, but I had found a strength within me I hadn't known existed. As we stood in the courtroom, I glanced at Megan and Sarah, their supportive nods, a testament to our solidarity. Jared's smug demeanor faltered as the evidence stacked against him. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. I tightened my grip on the stack of documents in my hand, feeling the weight of justice on my side. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring a future for my daughter. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for everything we deserved. Sarah's office was bustling with activity when I arrived. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Claire, we're ready to go over the strategy." "Are you prepared?" "Yes," I replied, my eyes meeting hers. "Let's do this." We sat down at the conference table, papers spread out in front of us. Sarah laid out the plan meticulously, documenting Jared's neglect, his affair, and his financial irresponsibility. "We have a strong case," she said confidently. "Our goal is full custody and a substantial alimony. Jared won't know what hit him." I nodded, feeling bolstered by her confidence. We reviewed the evidence once more. Photos of Jared and Lena, his erratic financial records, and affidavits from Megan and others who had witnessed his behavior. This wasn't just a fight. It was a battle for justice. The day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse loomed large as I walked in, feeling the weight of what was to come. Jared was already there, looking more polished than usual, but his eyes held a nervous edge. We filed into the courtroom, the judge presiding with an air of stern authority. Jared's lawyer began, trying to paint a picture of a struggling man who deserved leniency. "Your Honor," Sarah's voice cut through the room, "the evidence is clear. Jared Harper has been negligent, unfaithful, and financially irresponsible. We are requesting full custody of Claire's daughter and appropriate alimony to support her as she prepares for her new life." Jared's lawyer scoffed. "Mr. Harper is a dedicated father. He deserves joint custody and is willing to provide some alimony." Sarah stood firm. "Dedicated? Really? Let's go over the facts. Jared has been absent for a significant part of the pregnancy, spending time and money on extramarital affairs. He quit his job with no notice and has not contributed adequately to household expenses." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Jared shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Harper, would you like to speak?" I stood, hands trembling but voice steady. "Your Honor, I've worked hard to keep our family together, but I can't do it alone anymore. My husband has shown time and again that he isn't committed to this family. I want to provide a stable, loving home for my daughter." Jared shot me a glare. "Lies! She's turning everyone against me." The judge silenced him with a look. "Mr. Harper, you'll have your turn." We presented our evidence. Jared's cell phone records, bank statements, and photos of him with Lena. Megan's testimony was heartfelt, painting a picture of a man who had lost his way and a sister-in-law who was trying to pick up the pieces. Jared's lawyer tried to counter, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge's expression grew stern as the facts piled up. After hours of testimonies and cross-examinations, the judge took a brief recess. When she returned, her decision was swift and clear. "Mrs. Harper, you are granted full custody of your daughter. Mr. Harper, you will provide adequate alimony and child support." Jared's face went white. "This isn't fair," he shouted, but no one paid him any mind. The judge's gavel slammed down. "Court is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Claire. Justice is on your side." I glanced back at Jared, his face twisted with anger and fear. He had thought he could get away with everything, but now he faced the consequences of his actions. Megan hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you. You stood up for yourself and for your daughter." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of relief. "Thank you, Megan. I couldn't have done it without you." We walked out of the courthouse, the sun shining brightly. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while I felt hopeful. My daughter and I would start anew, leaving the past behind. Jared's downfall was just beginning, but my journey to rebuilding my life had already begun. Jared's face was plastered all over the papers. "Local man exposed, infidelity and financial failure lead to downfall." My phone buzzed non-stop with notifications and messages, some from mutual friends, others from strangers who had picked up on our story. Megan sat beside me, shaking her head. "He brought this on himself." A knock on the door interrupted our conversation. It was Sarah. "Just came from the judge's chambers. Jared's demands for reduced alimony have been denied. He's in deep debt, Claire." "I never wished for this, but he has to face the consequences." Sarah nodded. "And his legal troubles are only beginning. His part-time jobs found out about the court ruling and fired him. He's practically blacklisted. Employers don't take kindly to public shaming." Just then, my phone rang. Jared's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, but Sarah encouraged me to answer. "What do you want, Jared?" His voice was laced with desperation. "Claire, please. The media is killing me. I've lost everything. Can't we talk this through?" I could almost hear the pleading in his voice. "You made your choices. This is your consequence." "Please, Claire. I can't find work. Lena left me. I need help." "Megan and I will discuss this with Sarah," I said, looking at Sarah for confirmation. "But I can't promise anything. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done." I understand. Thank you," he croaked before the line went dead. Megan gave me a skeptical look. "Are you sure about this?" "He's at rock bottom. Maybe now he'll learn." Later that evening, Megan and I met with Sarah at her apartment. We reviewed Jared's desperate request. "Let's keep a record of this conversation," Sarah said, setting her phone to record. Then she dialed Jared. "Jared, it's Sarah. We're willing to listen, but you need to be honest." Jared's voice trembled through the speaker. "I am. I'm trying to turn things around." "Turnaround starts with responsibility," Sarah said sternly. "Admit to your errors, find solutions, and we might consider adjusting the stipulations." "I'll do whatever it takes," Jared replied hastily. "Then get clean," Megan added. "No more gambling, no more lies. Show us you can be reliable." "I will. I promise," he said, sounding like a man clutching his last hope. The next few weeks were revealing. Jared struggled to find even odd jobs. Megan and I occasionally spotted him around town looking disheveled and downtrodden. His proclamations of reform were met with skepticism by those who knew his past. One evening, as I prepared dinner, my phone buzzed with a new message. Jared's text read, "I've enrolled in a gambling support group. First session today." I showed Megan the message. "Think he means it?" "We'll see. Actions speak louder than words." Jared's actions began to show promise. He attended support group meetings regularly and even picked up volunteer work at a community center. Sarah kept track, cautiously optimistic. "He's making an effort," she said during one of our meetups, "but it's a long road." A month later, Jared requested a face-to-face meeting. With Sarah's guidance, we agreed, but kept it public at a nearby cafe. As he walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked more composed, yet there was still a shadow of his old self. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting down. "I know I don't deserve it." "What do you want, Jared?" Sarah asked, keeping the conversation on track. "I need to apologize. I was wrong. About everything. I want you to see I'm trying to change for the better, especially for our daughter," he said, his eyes earnest for once. I nodded. "Prove it, Jared. Words aren't enough." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn sobriety chip. 1 month clean. "Small steps, but I'm committed." Megan gave me a reassuring nod. "We'll keep an eye on you. Don't slip." The meeting ended with a sense of cautious hope. Jared had a long way to regain trust, but the first steps had been taken. For me and my daughter, a new chapter waited, filled with healing and cautious optimism. I sat at Megan's dining table, sorting through the stack of documents Sarah had prepared. The custody papers were finalized, and I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Mommy, my little girl Hannah, toddled over, tugging at my shirt. Her innocent eyes were a beacon of hope in the midst of our turbulent life. I scooped her up, planting a kiss on her forehead. "Hey, sweetie, Mommy's almost done. Go play with Aunt Megan for a while." Megan led Hannah to the living room, setting her down with a pile of toys. "She's growing up so fast." "She is," I said, feeling the bittersweet nature of our situation. Just then my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "I've got the restraining order paperwork ready. We need your signature." I placed the phone down and sighed. As much as Jared's recent efforts to change were promising, I couldn't take any chances with Hannah's safety. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Sarah standing there, her expression serious. "Claire, we need to talk. Jared's been making some disturbing comments in his support group." I frowned, letting her in. "What kind of comments?" Sarah glanced around, ensuring Hannah was out of earshot. "He said if he couldn't have custody, he'd take drastic measures. We need to act fast." Fear rippled through me. "Do you think he'd try to take her?" "We can't rule it out. We need to ensure you and Hannah are safe." As we discussed the plan, another knock sounded. I opened the door cautiously to see Jared standing there, looking agitated. "I need to see Hannah," he demanded. "You can't just show up unannounced, Jared," I said, blocking his view of the inside. "I'm her father," he growled. "I have rights." "Not without proper arrangements," Sarah said, stepping forward. "Leave now, or I'll call the police." Jared's eyes flashed with anger, but he turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. "Stay alert, Claire," Sarah warned. "He's unpredictable." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Around midnight, the sound of a window creaking open set my heart racing. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. A figure appeared in the hallway. "Jared, I just want to see her," he whispered harshly. "Get out now, Jared," I yelled, clutching Hannah close to me. Within minutes, the police arrived. Officer Mark Anderson, the responding officer, assessed the situation quickly. "Mr. Harper, you're under arrest for violating the restraining order." Jared struggled as they cuffed him, shouting, "I just wanted to see my daughter." As they led him away, Hannah stirred in my arms, her innocent eyes opening briefly. The sight of the police lights outside startled her, and she began to cry softly. Megan rushed in, wrapping us both in her arms. "It's over, Claire. He can't hurt you anymore." The next morning, Sarah came by with the final documentation for the restraining order. "This ensures he can't come near you or Hannah. If he tries anything again, there will be severe consequences." I signed the papers with a shaking hand, but a sense of finality and relief washed over me. Megan set down a plate of breakfast in front of me. "Here's to new beginnings. You and Hannah deserve peace." I smiled, looking at my daughter now playing with her toys, unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. "Thank you, Megan, for everything." "Always," she said, squeezing my shoulder. That evening, Megan and I sat together, reflecting on the past few months. "It's been a tough journey," she said, "but look how far you've come. I couldn't have done it alone, and now it's a fresh start for us." Looking at Hannah, peacefully sleeping, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Jared's toxicity was no longer a shadow over our lives. With the legal battles behind us, it was time to rebuild and move forward, fostering a life of love and safety for my daughter. Finally, we were free to create our future, unburdened by the past.
I'm Sarah. Teaching vocal lessons is what gets me up in the morning. At 42, I've seen my share of bright-eyed kids dreaming of the big stage, but it was Emma who brought a twist to my tale at 14, with a voice that needed work but had potential. It was her dad, Jack though, who flipped my world. "Miss Sarah, my dad's here to pick me up," Emma announced one day, her voice cutting through my thoughts like a sharp knife. I glanced up, expecting the usual parent, but there stood Jack, not what I expected. Tall with a look of someone who's seen stuff but kept standing. "Hi, I'm Jack. Emma's been going on about her lessons, you must be Sarah." His voice was straightforward, no frills. "Yeah, that's me. Emma's got talent, just needs a bit more push," I said, offering my hand. His handshake was firm, honest. "Appreciate you helping her out. I'm clueless about this stuff." Her mom was the singer, I caught the past tense. "I'm sorry," I said, the standard response, but his nod told me he'd heard it a million times. "No worries, we're managing, aren't we, Em?" His look towards Emma was full of that silent communication only parents and kids have. Emma rolled her eyes. The universal kid signal for parents, right? But smiled. "Yeah, we're good." The conversation should have ended there, but Jack lingered. "You know, I'm trying to get her more into music, keep her busy. Her brother too, Alex, kid's a ball of energy," I laughed. "Music's a great outlet, keeps them focused on something positive." "Exactly," Jack agreed. "Hey, ever do group lessons or something for a hyper 13-year-old who thinks he's the next big thing?" I shrugged. "I can handle 13-year-olds. Bring him by, we'll see if music or noise is his thing," Jack chuckled. And that sound did funny things to my stomach. "Deal, I'll bring him next time." "Thanks, Sarah." As they left, I shook my head, dismissing the fluttery feeling. Jack was just a dad, a widower trying to raise his kids right, nothing more. But life, as I found out, loves throwing curveballs. Jack started showing up more, sometimes with Alex, sometimes alone, under the pretext of discussing Emma's progress. We'd chat, and those chats started veering off music more often than not. One day, as autumn painted the world in hues of golden crimson, Jack turned to me, a half-smile on his face. "Sarah, would you consider going out with me? Like a date?" I blinked, surprised. "A date?" "Yeah," he said, his voice firmer than his casual stance suggested. "I like talking to you, the kids like you, and I think I want to see where this could go." It was unexpected, this shift from casual chats to the possibility of something more. But looking into Jack's earnest eyes, I felt a pull, an interest I hadn't felt in a long time. "Okay, Jack, let's see where this goes," I found myself saying, a smile breaking through my usual reserve. Merging into Jack's world was like stepping onto a stage without a rehearsal. Emma was easy, music was our language. Alex, though, was a different beat. Skeptical of the new woman in his dad's life, protective of his sister, and the memory of his mom. And then there was Mary, Jack's mom, a matriarch with warmth and sharpness all rolled into one. The day Jack introduced me to Alex, the kid sized me up like I was a new recruit. "So you're the music teacher," Alex said, crossing his arms, his eyes narrowed. It wasn't unfriendly, but it wasn't open arms either. "That's me, and you must be the next big thing in music from what I've heard," I shot back, trying to break the ice with a smile. He cracked a grin, the skepticism in his eyes softening a bit. "Maybe. Guess we'll see if you're any good." "Challenge accepted," I said. And from there, things started to ease into a rhythm. Alex had energy for days and a curious mind. He didn't take to music like Emma, but he respected the passion behind it. Meeting Mary was another story. She had a reputation for being tough as nails with a heart of gold hidden somewhere beneath. Walking into her house for the first time, I was greeted with a scrutinizing gaze that could make a seasoned performer sweat. "You're Sarah," she started, her voice firm but not unkind. "Good things, I hope," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She chuckled, a sound that carried both warmth and a hint of challenge. "Depends on who you ask. Sit down. Let's see if you pass the test." The afternoon unfolded with conversations that swung from blunt to deeply personal. Mary didn't hold back, asking about my intentions with her son, my thoughts on family, and my ambitions. It was like a verbal sparring match, but beneath her tough exterior, I saw glimpses of the love she had for her family. "Jack's been through a lot, the kids too. They need stability, not just another person passing through," Mary said, locking eyes with me. "I'm not here for a temporary gig, Mary. I care about them, about Jack. I'm in this," I responded, my voice carrying a conviction I felt deep in my bones. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded, as if I'd passed some unspoken test. "Good. They could use someone like you. Just remember, kids and Jack come first, always." "Always," I echoed, understanding the weight of her words. As months turned into a year, my bond with Jack's family deepened. Emma and Alex, each in their own way, started to let me in. We had our moments, disagreements, misunderstandings, the usual family dynamics. But underneath it all was a growing sense of belonging. Jack's proposal came on a quiet evening, after a day filled with laughter and music. It was simple, no grand gestures, just him and me and a question that promised a new chapter. "Sarah, I've seen you with the kids, with my mom, with me. You become a part of us, a part we didn't even know was missing. Marry me, let's make this official," he said. Without a moment's hesitation, I said yes. The wedding was small, an intimate affair with those who mattered most. Mary, despite her tough exterior, shed a few tears, whispering, "Take care of them, Sarah. You're family now." And as I looked around at my new family, Jack, Emma, Alex, and Mary, I realized I wasn't just stepping into their lives. We were creating a new melody together, one that had its dissonances but was uniquely beautiful in its complexity. Life with Jack and the kids had settled into a sort of comfortable routine, filled with school runs, music lessons, and family dinners. But as life tends to do, it threw us a curveball that changed everything. Mary's health took a nosedive, leaving her paralyzed and in need of constant care. Jack decided the best thing was to move her into our home. It made sense, but I don't think any of us were truly prepared for the impact it would have. From the get-go, the weight of caring for Mary fell heavily on my shoulders. Jack was caught up with work, and the kids, well, they were still kids. I didn't mind at first, Mary was family after all. But as time went on, the strain began to show. One particularly tough day, after a grueling session of trying to get Mary comfortable and dealing with a mountain of household chores, I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling utterly defeated. Mary had been particularly difficult, refusing to eat or take her medication, and Jack had been no help, locked away in his office. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear Jack come in. He stood there watching me, an unreadable expression on his face. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice void of the warmth it once held. I braced myself, knowing this conversation wouldn't be good. "What's up?" "It's about my mom and you. You seem off lately, not handling things as well as you used to." I stared at him, incredulous. "Off, Jack? I'm doing everything I can. I'm tired, I'm stressed. I'm trying to be there for your mom, for the kids, For you, and it's never enough. He took a step back as if my words were physical blows. I know you're trying, but it's not just about effort, Sarah. It's about results, and right now, we're not seeing them. His words were like a slap in the face. Results. As if I was just another employee failing to meet my targets. Not his wife struggling to keep our family together. Years rolled by, each one more challenging than the last. Mary's condition didn't improve, and my relationship with Jack and the kids, especially as they grew into adults, became more strained. The once vibrant connection I shared with Emma and Alex, built on music and mutual respect, faded into polite indifference. Then, Mary passed away. It was a difficult time for all of us, a period marked by grief and reflection. I thought naively that maybe this would bring us closer, that shared sorrow would mend the cracks in our family, but I was wrong. After the funeral, things took a turn for the worse. Jack's demeanor changed overnight. The man who once looked at me with love and gratitude, now regarded me with disdain. "You're just not the same anymore, Sarah," Jack snapped one evening, his words laced with bitterness that caught me off guard. "You've let yourself go, you're old, you're ugly, I'm tired of you." I stood there shocked. His harsh words felt like a physical blow, leaving me speechless and hurt. "Jack, how can you say that after everything?" I started, but he cut me off. "Everything? You mean taking care of my kids and my mother? That was your job, Sarah. I tolerated you because you did the chores, nothing more." His words were like a knife, twisting deeper with each syllable. And the kids, now adults, weren't any better. Emma, once my closest ally, turned cold. "You really have no one but us, and you're pushing even us away. You're just a lonely, useless woman," she said, her voice void of the warmth that once held. Alex was no kinder, seizing every opportunity to belittle me. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here," he sneered whenever he passed me in the hall. I couldn't believe these were the same people I had loved and cared for, had considered my family. The transformation was stark, their contempt for me a constant reminder of how much had changed. It wasn't just the emotional toll, my body began to betray me too. My legs, once strong and sure, now ached with a pain that made every step a chore. The doctor's words were clinical, detached, but they hit hard. "It's chronic," he said, scribbling something on his pad. "You'll need to manage it. Adjust your activities." Adjust my activities. As if my life wasn't already a series of adjustments. Concessions to a family that saw me as nothing more than a burden. One day, as I struggled to stand after a long bout of cleaning, Jack walked in, his eyes scanning the room, always looking for something to criticize. "What's wrong with you now?" he asked, his voice dripping with impatience. I tried to steady myself, to push past the pain. "My legs," I started. "They've been really bad today." The doctor said. He cut me off with a wave of his hand, a dismissive gesture that felt like a slap. "Always something with you, isn't it? Can't even rely on you to do the basic chores around here without making a big deal out of it." Teaching at the private school, my passion and my escape became impossible. Jack's reaction to my diagnosis was as cold as ice. "So what? You're just going to sit around all day now? Great. And another mouth to feed without any use," he sneered. The day I told him about my condition, his words cut deeper than the sharp pain in my legs. I wanted to scream, to tell him how much he was hurting me, but I knew it would only make things worse. So I bit back the pain and the tears, trying to find some way to navigate this new reality. Living in Jack's house became a daily reminder of my dependence. I was reduced to limping around, trying to keep the house in order, cooking meals that were often met with criticism or indifference. The pain was constant, a sharp reminder of my predicament, but I pushed through, terrified of what would happen if I stopped. Jack and the kids lived as if nothing had changed, as if my struggles were just a minor inconvenience to their lives. The inheritance from Mary's passing seemed to ignite a spending spree, new gadgets, clothes, jewelry, all flaunted in front of me, as if to underscore my exclusion from their lives. "You should be grateful we're keeping you around," Jack would say, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Without us, you'd be on the street, remember that." Emma and Alex took their cues from their father, treating me more like an unwanted servant than a stepmother. "Don't forget to wash my new jeans. Sarah wouldn't want them ruined like you ruin everything else." Emma would toss over her shoulder, her words sharp as knives. Alex was no better. "Make sure dinner's on time tonight. We've got places to be, and we can't wait around for you to limp around the kitchen," he'd say, his disdain barely veiled. I harbored fantasies of leaving, of finding some way to reclaim my independence and dignity. But the reality was harsh. With no income, no savings, and a body that betrayed me at every turn, I was stuck. My dreams of escape seemed just that, dreams, distant and unattainable. In the midst of my lowest point, feeling trapped and useless, I stumbled upon something that sparked a flicker of hope in me. It was during one of those long sleepless nights scrolling aimlessly through the internet on my old, barely functioning laptop. I found a forum for vocal teachers, giving online lessons. The idea struck me like a lightning bolt. The next day, with the house empty and my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear, I set up a makeshift studio in the corner of my room. I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested, but I had to try. To my astonishment, inquiries started coming in. People were interested in learning from me, despite my physical limitations. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt valued for my skills and knowledge. Jack and the kids noticed the change in me but didn't know the cause. "What's got into you?" Jack asked one evening, his tone suspicious as he caught me humming while preparing dinner. "Just feeling a bit better today," I replied, hiding the fear that he would disapprove, or worse, try to stop me. He snorted, dismissing my response. "Well, don't get too happy, you've still got your duties around here." I nodded, my heart sinking, but I didn't let his words deter me. The hours I spent teaching online became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, share my love for music and forget, even if just for a little while, the pain and humiliation I endured daily. I invested the little money I made from teaching into better equipment, slowly but surely building my online presence. The physical pain was still there, a constant reminder of my limitations. But when I was teaching, it receded into the background, overshadowed by the joy of connecting with my students. As the months went by, I took a moment to look at the numbers, something I had been avoiding, afraid to jinx it. But there it was, clear as day on my screen. I was making money, real money, more than I ever made teaching at the private school, more than I ever thought possible from the confines of this oppressive house, and shockingly, more than Jack made with his so-called prestigious job. I remember sitting there, staring at the figures, a mix of disbelief and triumph washing over me. For so long, I had felt like a burden, a financial leech in Jack's eyes, but here I was, earning my own way. And not just scraping by, but actually doing better than him. For a moment, I let myself bask in the success, allowing the numbers to speak for themselves. I was doing this. I was making it happen despite everything that had been thrown my way. It was a silent victory, one I couldn't share with anyone in the house, but it was mine all the same. The betrayal that came was not just a single moment of cruelty, but a culmination of years of disregard and contempt crystallized into one devastating dinner conversation. There we were, sitting around the table, me serving them as I always did, when Jack decided to drop his bombshell with a smirk that I had come to love. I got promoted at work, he started, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe this was good news, something positive for once. But then he continued. So I bought a new house, a better one fitting for my status. That's when the air around me grew cold. My hand stilled the plate I was holding, nearly slipping from my grasp. Before I could even muster a congratulations, he landed his cruel blow. And I'll be moving there with the kids, not you, you're not coming. His words were like a slap, but the mocking laugh that followed was a knife to the heart. I mean, come on, Sarah, did you really think you'd fit in an old limp like you? No, it's time I found someone younger, more suitable, he continued. The laughter that erupted from Emma cut even deeper. Yeah, and guess what? This old house sold. Enjoy the streets, Sarah. I stood there frozen as he slid the divorce papers across the table. The audacity, the sheer coldness of it all, was staggering. Yet as I looked at those papers, something within me refused to break. I didn't cry, didn't plead. I simply signed them, each stroke of my name a silent vow to myself. When morning came, I was ready. Jack and the kids watched with a mix of surprise and that familiar contempt as I howled my bags to the door. Their parting words were mean to wound, to kick me when I was down. Hope you like the flop houses, Sarah. Jack sneered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. But I walked out of that house with my head held high, the weight of their insults falling away with each step I took. For the first time in years I felt a sense of freedom, a clarity that had been missing from my life. Settling into my new rented apartment was like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. It was my space, my sanctuary, where I could dive into my online vocal teaching without looking over my shoulder. Hearing from friends, I found out Jack had moved into that fancy new house with the kids, true to form. Instead of being smart with the money from the old house, they blew it on all sorts of nonsense. Typical. That's when I decided to play my hand. Over the years, I'd saved voicemails and recorded moments of their verbal lashings, a dark library of the abuse I suffered. Without a second thought, I sent them off to Jack's boss. It felt like releasing doves into a storm, but these birds carried grenades. The call I got from Jack after was music to my ears, but not the kind I usually taught. Sarah, what have you done? He screamed into the phone, his voice a mix of rage and panic. They're demoting me, cutting my salary, how could you? In the background, I could hear Emma and Alex, their voices shrill, hurling insults my way. But their words felt distant, inconsequential. Oh, Jack, I said, a laugh bubbling up. Looks like you're the one who might end up without a roof over your head. Meanwhile, I'm here thinking about buying my own place, how the tables have turned. The silence that followed was sweet, filled with their disbelief and shock. Then Jack, ever the beggar now, started his plea. Sarah, please, you have to help us, we could lose the house, the kids. Think about the kids. We'll take you back, I swear. Swear we'll do anything. Hearing them grovel, offering to take me back as if they were doing me a favor, was the cherry on top. Take me back to be your maid again? No thanks. I've got better things to do. Hanging up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A final closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me nothing but pain. They were desperate, flailing in the mess they'd made, and for once I wasn't there to clean it up. Through the grapevine, friends let slip that Jack, along with Emma and Alex, had been evicted. Couldn't keep up with the mortgage, they said. Now they were crammed into some small apartment, the kids juggling jobs to make ends meet. The twist of fate wasn't lost on me. After everything they put me through, there was a bitter taste of justice in the air. Can you believe it? I mused aloud during a call with one of my closest friends from the teaching community, Lena. Jack and the kids scrambling to keep a roof over their heads after all that talk about me ending up in a flophouse. Lena's laugh crackled through the phone. Karma's a real kicker, ain't it? You, on the other hand, are living proof that what goes around comes around. You're doing amazing. Then came the opportunity of a lifetime. A well-known music school reached out, having heard of my teaching success. They offered me a position, not just as a teacher, but as a coordinator for their online program. It was more than a job. It was recognition, a chance to influence and inspire on a scale I had never imagined. As I sat down to sign the contract, a wave of gratitude washed over me. To think, not so long ago, I was convinced my life had crumbled beyond repair. And now here I was, signing a contract that was not just a job offer but a symbol of my journey from darkness into light. The celebration that night was simple, just me and a few close friends I had made along the way, including Lena, who had quickly become a pillar of support and friendship. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Lena leaned over and whispered, "You're an inspiration, Sarah. You've turned your life into a symphony of success." Her words struck a chord, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. Thank you, Lena. It's been quite the journey, but you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. The hardships, the pain, it all led me here, to this moment, to a life I can be proud of. As the night wore on, filled with music and laughter, I realized that this was more than just a new chapter. It was a whole new book, a story of triumph over adversity, of finding harmony in the chaos.
I've never met anyone who was worse than my husband, Ben. I truly believe he was the worst man ever. It was his reaction that was especially shocking when he learned I was pregnant. I wish it had been Karen's child. Right in front of the new life in my womb, Ben let that slip. What followed was a mess of his excuses, and eventually, he pushed for a divorce. My name is Sandra Owen. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. Being a housewife allowed me to lead a stable life, thanks to Tony, who remarried me. Originally, I had a former husband whom I was married to for 2 years. His name was Ben, and he was the manager of the cafe I often visited. Ben, recognizing me as a frequent visitor, struck up a conversation, and it led to a relationship. While we were dating, he seemed like any other man, and I had no bad impressions of him. Being the same age, we got along well. After 3 years of dating, we tied the knot. I became a married woman, and coincidentally, Ben changed his job and started working in a trading company. His salary increased significantly compared to when he was a cafe manager. However, after our marriage, his attitude completely changed. "Ben, I want to go pay the rent tomorrow. Can I get the money?" After marrying Ben, I became a housewife at his request. I was supposed to manage all household chores and our finances. Each month, I would receive his pay slip and budget it for the month. Initially, I thought living on a single income would be tough. But surprisingly, we managed with just Ben's salary. Although I handled the money management, Ben never gave me access to the bank accounts or cards. So I always had to ask him verbally. Whenever I asked for money for the rent, Ben would reluctantly agree. "You know, you have it easy. Just doing household chores and you can stay in this house." Saying this, Ben handed me an envelope, apparently fresh from the bank. Should I get a job then? And what about the house? I never thought the very person who asked me to be a housewife would criticize me for it. However, working in a company must be stressful. There are many men who can only vent at home. I accepted this as part of Ben's character, his weakness, and tried to interact with him with a smile. But looking back, the kindness I showed him now infuriates me. Our married life, although sometimes we had our differences, was more normal than I had expected. We weren't suddenly impoverished. I received a small allowance, and while we weren't rich, we lived moderately well. However, on the day of our 6-month anniversary, Ben didn't come home. Hey! It's our anniversary today. What time will you be back? I sent messages through the app, but they weren't read for a long time. Time passed, and before I knew it, it was past midnight. The elaborate meal I had prepared had completely cooled, and I reached my limit of sleepiness first. The next day, when I went to the living room, the side dishes that should have been wrapped were thrown in the trash. What? You came home? And what is this? This is awful. Holding back my sadness, I headed to Ben's bedroom. There, he was lying on the bed, still in his suit. Ben, wake up. I shook him gently as I spoke. After a while, Ben woke up. What, you're so noisy. He was clearly in a bad mood, but I decided to ask him anyway. The food I left on the table. Why did you throw it away? Huh? I don't remember. I came back drunk yesterday. Let me sleep. With that, Ben brushed my hand aside and fell back into a deep sleep. Looking at him, I suddenly felt empty. Moreover, at that time, I had something I hadn't yet told him. I had intended to reveal it as part of our anniversary celebration. But I couldn't even talk about it. I could feel it in my bones. Our marital relationship, although slowly, was cooling off. One day, after Ben had slept all day and I had spent my time doing household chores, I broached a serious topic in the evening when he woke up. What do you want to talk about? I want to play games. When I spoke to him, Ben clearly looked annoyed. It was disheartening for me too, but I couldn't give up here. Look, I didn't get my period last month, and it still hasn't come. When I said that, Ben stopped moving and turned to me with a muttering voice. What? That's what it means. Did you test? Did you take a test? Of course. It was positive. Finally, we're having a baby. I found myself smiling as I spoke. This child was something I had long desired. Living alone in this house without Ben was lonely. If I could raise a child, play with them. The possibilities seemed endless. However, Ben's response was not what I had hoped for. Are you kidding me? You're pregnant. What are we going to do now? Ben, you don't want children. It was my turn to be stunned. My previously smiling face froze, and I felt my heart trying to leap from my throat. Surely, I must be making a foolish face right now. Ben had said, "We'll think about it when the child is here." And I had thought he wanted children too. But reality was apparently not so simple. A child from you would never be cute. What did you say? As I stumbled over my words, Ben continued. I wish it had been Karen's child. Oops. Ben hastily covered his mouth, but of course, I did not miss that. What do you mean by that? I was fully alert to Ben's slip. Wait, don't tell me, are you cheating? Ben averted his eyes from my question. I'm asking you. I yelled out loud, causing Ben to flinch. Then he said, I just don't love you anymore. Really, there's no appeal in a housewife. I felt a violent shock and anger. It was none other than Ben himself who had asked me to be this unappealing housewife. So, you mean it would have been better if I had kept working, right? I was ready to give up my career to become your wife. Are you trampling all over that? Stop that. You're so annoying, always picking fights. So, there was no need for me to become a housewife after all. I was overwhelmed by anger and sorrow and could hardly keep my composure. Yet Ben responded indifferently, which made it all the more painful. If you hadn't become a housewife, who would have taken care of the house? I get stressed when the house is dirty. It was utterly ridiculous. We were exchanging words, but there was no emotional exchange at all. Surely, nothing I said would get through. Yet, I desperately returned words. Your heart is the dirtiest of all right now. Ben then bluntly pushed a selfish conclusion. If you think so, let's just get a divorce. It'll make things quicker. I was at a loss for words. Ben kept pressing. I won't be paying child support. I don't have the money. So, whether you have the baby is up to you. Can people really be this cruel? It's merciless. After all, we had been together for over 4 years, including our dating period. Where did it go wrong? I had tried my best to be by his side. But perhaps he was just fickle, a person who couldn't appreciate the ongoing everyday life. But now, it was too late. After the talk, Ben went out and came back with the divorce papers, already filled out on his side. As I silently stared at them, he pressured me to sign. Ben was serious. Was today the end of our marriage? As I thought this, I hurriedly ran my pen across the paper. Watching Ben's expressionless face as I signed, my pen sped up. Thus, my status changed from a married woman to a divorced, pregnant single. After the divorce, I faced harsh days. I was left with about $5,000, which I managed to get through property division. That was no surprise, as Ben had squandered our savings without my knowledge. I had confronted him about the affair, but he never confessed the truth. I thought about hiring a detective or a lawyer. But I didn't have the funds or the mental state to pursue it further. It was best to cut off the source of evil. That's how I rationalized the divorce to myself. With my environment drastically changing and only $5,000 in savings, which might last a month at best, I had to find a new home, pay the initial costs, buy necessities, and find a job. Every day felt like hell to me. But gradually, I started to see some good results. I was grateful to find a job quickly. I got hired as a receptionist at a high-rise condo because I could speak Spanish. I found a new place, moved in, and managed to save $500, though life was still tight. Even though I found a job, I was pregnant and didn't know how long I could work. During this time, I met someone. That was Tony, who would become my new husband. We often talked, mainly because I was the receptionist. How do I get to the bulky trash area again? Again? I chuckled. He had just moved in and still couldn't grasp the layout of the building. Go down to the second basement floor, move right. And then turn left, where you'll find the entrance. Thank you so much. I'm new to a high-rise condo, and it feels like a maze. After my explanation, he laughed sheepishly. His pure smile and the honesty in his demeanor were apparent. We talked more outside of work, and 3 months into my job, he asked me out. But I'm divorced, you know? And I'm pregnant. Tony was certainly attractive to me. He apparently ran a major electronics manufacturer, which manufactured TVs, air conditioners, and even the parts for the elevators in our high-rise condo. However, he was humble, which I found appealing. And his good qualities didn't end there. A child? That's fine. Actually, I'm divorced too. What? I was surprised as he explained. I'm infertile. My previous wife left me because of it. I see. But if we were to get married, could you love a child that's not your own? I felt I had asked a heavy question, almost like a stressful job interview. But he immediately responded. "There's no reason I couldn't love your child." Hearing those words, I nearly collapsed to my knees. His name is Tony Simpson, a 43-year-old corporate president, 3 years my senior. A man from a different world, willing to lift up someone like me. Honestly, I was afraid to believe it. It felt like some sort of prank. But looking into his eyes, I realized everything. His eyes were sincere, with no deceit, focused solely on me. Though I had no evidence, if Tony was my husband, he would surely cherish me. Or perhaps, like Ben, he might change. I wrestled with this in my mind until the end. But strangely, I felt a comfort with him that I had never experienced before. I stopped overthinking and took his hand. Thus, I started dating him, and we remarried soon. Just a short while ago, I couldn't have imagined remarrying so quickly. But remarriage wasn't the goal. My due date was approaching, and as it neared, I fell ill. My stomach hurts. When we married, I had to move out of the newly signed rental immediately. But Tony covered the penalty and moving expenses. Now, I live with him on the top floor of the high-rise condo. Tony, who I thought was a bit clueless, turned out to be a resident of the top floor, which made me doubt whether he really should be my spouse. Yet, when I said my stomach hurt, he panicked. Are you okay? What do you need?" Despite his cool appearance, I started seeing his flustered side. With Tony's support, I safely gave birth to a daughter. But then, a significant issue arose. The doctor had unexpected news. "Mr. Simpson, please brace yourself. Your daughter has almost no vision." "What?" Tony and I froze, unable to comprehend the doctor's words as we looked at each other. The doctor continued with a sympathetic expression. "Her vision won't lead to complete blindness, but it will be quite weak." Although initially confused by the doctor's words, we knew that our newborn daughter was not at fault. Definitely, abandoning her because she couldn't see was not an option. We were grateful she came into this world, and we named her Heaven. Since then, apart from her visual impairment, Heaven grew up without any issues and recently celebrated her 9th birthday. "Tony, did you find what you were looking for?" Today, we were supposed to go shopping together for Heaven's birthday present. "Sorry, you two go ahead to the store. I'll catch up." Hearing this, I left the house with Heaven. "Mommy, is Daddy coming?" "He'll come later, don't worry." Because her vision is limited, Heaven held my hand tightly as we walked. I was describing the path to her when someone suddenly spoke to me. "Hey, aren't you Sandra?" Turning toward the voice, I was shocked to find Ben Miller, my ex-husband who had left me 10 years ago. "Ben, what are you doing in such a fancy neighborhood? What does it matter to you?" I suddenly became aware of my shallow breathing. I couldn't seem to get enough oxygen. Sensing my distress, Heaven spoke up. "Mommy? Who are you talking to?" "Stay quiet for a bit, Heaven." As I tried to calm Heaven, my ex-husband responded. "Wow, is this the kid that was born? Why has she been squinting the whole time?" "That's none of your business," I retorted, and Ben paused for a moment before replying in a mocking tone. Can't she see?" Puffed. "The kid's defective just like her mother." Laughing loudly by himself, passers-by stared at him with puzzled looks. I felt embarrassed being in such a situation, troubled that I had dragged Heaven into this. This man always knew how to upset me. And as I was reflecting on this, a voice suddenly came from behind. "Sandra, Heaven, what's going on?" Turning around, I saw Tony standing there. At the same moment, Ben began to tremble when he saw him. "Mr. Simpson." Hearing Ben's words, I was in disbelief. Tony asked him, "Weren't you the one who came for an interview the day before yesterday, Ben? What are you doing here?" I could tell from being with Tony often that his voice was displeased. To others, it might seem like a normal inquiry, but I couldn't be fooled. Ben was visibly shaken by Tony's words. Well, I was thinking about moving after getting an offer from your company. So I was checking out the area. Is that so? And do you think you'll be joining our company?" The conversation seemed more like an interrogation by Tony. With each word, Ben became more flustered. The way he had behaved towards my daughter and me moments ago seemed like a complete lie. I thought the interview went well," Ben muttered weakly. Watching the two of them, I could piece together what was happening. Ben had come for a mid-career interview at Tony's company and was now waiting for the outcome. Tony had likely been one of the interviewers. As Ben honestly shared his thoughts on the interview, Tony's face smiled, but his eyes were cold. Taking a breath, Tony then looked straight at Ben and began to speak. "Do you think someone who speaks ill of my own wife and child belongs in my company?" With Tony's words, it became clear that our previous conversation had been overheard. "What? Your wife and child?" "No, I didn't mean." Ben was stunned and immobilized by the revelation, but Tony did not relent in his pursuit. "Why are you surprised?" "I've heard about your past with Sandra. I never imagined that the person applying to my company was you." At Tony's words, Ben was at a loss for words. His lips twitched as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Additionally, he was visibly sweating profusely from his forehead. Well. Ben was completely cornered. In this situation, there was nothing he could say that would allow him to prevail over Tony. Tony's momentum was unstoppable. "When you insulted my wife and child, it was as if you insulted me. Insulting me is one thing, but I will never forgive someone who speaks ill of my precious family." Ben let out an inaudible grunt and froze with his mouth open. "For now, you're not hired. There's no need to discuss it further with HR." Tony coldly delivered the verdict, and Ben collapsed on the spot. He then started to mumble something, though it was unclear whether he was speaking to us or just to himself. I turned down marriage proposals and boasted to everyone about this job. I even bought a new car. And now, to think I'd fail an interview over a single insult. Observing his demeanor, I could tell that Ben still did not think he was at fault. But Tony felt the same way and said mercilessly, "If you cannot grasp the severity of that single offense, then you understand nothing. Please disappear forever from our sight." The normally gentle Tony who showed his kindness to me was not present now. Instead, he resembled a noble male lion standing alone to protect his pack. At the same time, I felt proud of him and reassured about my decision to marry him. "Please, never appear before us again," as Tony said. Ben gave no response. Seeing this, Tony raised his voice a bit more and shouted, "Well," and Ben responded in a frightened voice, "Right, I got it." My daughter, who had been sensing only the voices, clung to me, and for once, I was glad that her vision was impaired. It was not appropriate for my growing daughter to witness such a dismal scene. Ben, scolded by us, walked away with a soulless expression. His aura was one of complete despair, but I felt no sympathy for him. He had caused me much suffering. Frankly, I thought he deserved to suffer even more. although Ben's sudden appearance caused a disturbance. Once it was over, Tony returned to his usual calm self. "Tony, thank you. Don't mention it." Tony smiled back at me as I thanked him. However, in a typical clumsy moment, he exclaimed, "Oh, I left my wallet," and had to go back home. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his action. But I knew that with him, life would surely be enjoyable from now on.